I'm live. So hopefully this saves the way I think it will. And I wanted to do a short video because I had a very long conversation about the types of essays that you're going to see on your English language arts 7 through 12 content area exam. So mostly people see that they have issues with their essays, and you typically go in, or I see that students go in sort of blinded and not knowing what sort of essay topics they're going to have. And what I found is that you can actually do quite a bit of preparation at home before you take the exam, so that you can feel fairly confident that I don't know what I'm supposed to look at, like here, fairly confident that you will do well on both essay exams. So there are two essays, and the first is a literary response. Literary response. My mouth is having difficulties. So in this essay, you will be given two pieces of literature, some text. You'll either have a poem, you will definitely have a poem. You may have two poems, or you'll have a poem and an excerpt from something. It could be a biography, historical fiction, it could be straight fiction, it could be a part of a speech. So it just, there's all sorts of combinations that they can give you, but they'll give you those two pieces, and they chose them because there is an underlying theme that connects them, and it is your task as the test taker to analyze that text at a level and a rigor that would befit a 12th grade AP class, because that's the highest level that you'll be required to teach. So it stands to reason that you should be able to analyze on that level that you're going to need those students to analyze on. So you have your two pieces of text. You have to quickly analyze them for not their literary merit, but for the underlying theme, that either they're different in some way, but they speak to the same theme, or they're the same and they speak to the same theme. But you have to identify that, and then you have to show the reader, which is the grader, how you got that answer, how you came to that. So, my cat walking over there. How did you ascertain the theme, and how does it sort of come together? And I know the one in the practice exam from Pearson, they have the same theme, but they're illustrated in sort of different ways. One is in more of a positive light. There's definitely a different tone, but they both speak to the same theme. So that is the literary response. Now, you can practice for this, not by writing a whole bunch of essays, but by going to the AP website. Just Google AP release exams. And that's the exam that high schoolers will take in order to get college credit for their really challenging English courses, which is the highest level that you'll be required to teach, unless you do concurrent enrollment. If you have a master's and you're working with some, your district works with a community college, and whatever, you would know that if that's the case. But for the purposes of this exam, going to the AP website and looking at those release exams, only the first question really makes sense with your literary response. The first question for each of the administrations for that AP literature exam is sort of a synthesis, and you have to identify a theme. And just reading through the student responses that the AP organization gives for raters and teachers alike to use is a really good review of how pieces are dissected, how they're analyzed, different levels of rigor. You can analyze a piece, merely on the surface, and then someone can go in there and really dig deep and make sort of correlations, extended metaphors, and really talk about the same thing, but on another level. And that's what you need to be practicing with. So going and reading, students already doing that, reading the pieces that they read, that the state gave them, not the state, the AP test gave them, and then reading their responses just to see how they played with their analysis, because every analysis is different. It's an open-ended question. So as long as you prove your point, you're fine. Now moving on to I wanted to do this really short. Moving on to the pedagogical essay. So for this essay, you are given a student sample. It's going to be some piece of writing, and it is your job to evaluate it in terms of effectiveness for the assignment. Excuse me. And then you will have some of this. So after you read their sample, you're going to have to identify a strength that you found in the writing in the student piece. And then you're going to have to identify a weakness. And then you have to come up with an activity that will help bridge the gap and help strengthen that weakness. Not just for the person who's having that particular issue, but for the whole class in an activity. And for this one, I think that you can actually prepare more in advance than you can for the literary response, which you can do, quite a lot of preparation if you read a whole bunch of samples and you review that sort of thing. I think it'll come quite easy to you on the day of the exam. For this, for the pedagogical response, you can also prepare, because there are only so many issues or weaknesses that the state is going to come up with to give you in a sample. So you might have short and choppy sentences. The student might be using a whole bunch of short and choppy sentences, and it's taken away from the overall effectiveness of the writing piece. That might be an issue. It might be that the student did not appropriately choose the audience, and so the way that they're speaking or the diction that they're using, their word choice is off because the audience is off. That could be an issue. I don't think severe grammatical error is something that they would ask, but it might be. I'll have to check my notes. In any event, there's an entire study session that I do with students where we sort of take a look at one and walk through what sort of things we might say. Like I said, for this second essay, you really can do a whole bunch of preparation at home. So what the state is looking for, and you can give them in 3 parts. 3 parts. The first is they want for you to identify a strength. So you read the student writing and you identify a strength. And then they want textual evidence. Show me how that strength is working for the overall effectiveness of the essay. Use actual quotations. Use the student text in there. Next, you're going to move on to the weakness. Do not give more than one weakness. Do not give more than one strength. Just be one and done. Also with the weakness, be one and done. So if I'm going to choose that the student cannot appropriately assign audience, language to audience, then that's the one that I'm going to stick with. And I would have to give an example of that. And then the next piece, there's another piece to that. So the example of it, the actual text, and then how it is affecting the overall effectiveness, how it's weakening the overall effectiveness of the writing piece. And so that's important. Connect the dots for them. This is what they did well. This is them doing it really well. This is what they did kind of poorly. This is them doing it poorly. And this is why it needs to be fixed, because we're hurting this purpose. Next, moving on to that last piece, which is your activity. And that's where you present an activity that would address that particular weakness. And here's where the whole planning would take place. You can come up with scenarios without reading a piece. So let's say that we're going to do audience, and this is one from the study guides. The students are supposed to write a letter to their principal so that they could use cell phones and that the rules would get more lax. But they're writing to the principal, who will then make the decision to send to the board. Okay, so these are important people. The student should be able to ascertain what is the proper language or etiquette. Is it boardroom talk? Is it bedroom talk? Is it basketball court talk? I don't know. Is it appropriate for the audience? And so with this particular piece, the student was very informal. He was like, yo, I think it's dumb that we don't have our phones, and like people be in the classroom and then there could be guns. And so there was a lot going on there that wasn't already, even if you didn't go deep and look at the content, which you could choose to go deep and look into the content, just on the surface, it was clear that they did not choose the appropriate language in order to be successful with a persuasive text for their principal. So for us, it would be try to find something that was positive. And they gave examples. They gave examples to back up their points, which was positive. So you would name that and then give and showed why that was something that is important for this persuasive task. And then say, however, the student missed the mark on assigning the appropriate audience, and therefore the language was sorely inappropriate for persuasive essay that is for the principal. And then you would give, specific either words or phrases that would show, excuse me, probably a student, that would show that it affects the overall weakness, that it seems informal, like the student's possibly not taking it seriously. And as far as a persuasive essay is concerned, the principal is going to be unaffected by it. So how can you fix that? Well, there's lots of different activities that you can brainstorm ahead of time and already come with, or have the one that you know that's really good, and do it that way. So I like to choose to focus a little bit more in, instead of so broadly about the audience, just say that their word choice or their diction is bad for their, for the chosen audience. And for diction, one of my go-to assignments is to have students create a found poem, which they love. So I could take any book that was around me. I have Hillbilly Elegy, Ray Bradbury, Zen and the Art of Writing, Toni Morrison, a whole bunch of books that I'm reading and should be reading. So I tell them to open one page, and whatever we're reading, they can go to whatever page. And on only that page, they have to come up with a poem or something of substance. It doesn't have to be a poem. It could be prose if they're feeling prose better that day. And they love it, because if we're reading anybody worth reading, their words and their diction that the author chose particularly for their novel is going to be rich, and they see that, and they are so proud of the things they were able to mold from the fancy clay that I gave them. And then on another day, we take their benchmark essay or whatever essay that they did last, and they have to do the same assignment with their own words. And almost 100% of the time, I would say like 99% of the time, actually, I don't remember when it hasn't worked, where they're like, everybody has an epiphany and they say to themselves, I didn't choose the best words. Like, I didn't choose any good words. Everybody always says that, because I've taught 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. And undoubtedly, everybody says the same thing. Miss, I should have chosen better words. So I like to do that early on, and so that they see that words matter and that they're important. And this is a great activity that you can have. So you don't have to be so big with your explanation. They want for you to be short and to the point. So I hope that was helpful for you. You can think of activities for short and choppy sentences. You can think of activities for just like the way that the persuasive body goes, the organization, and maybe that's off and something that you could teach for that. I do have sessions available. My schedule's been very busy with my 5 babies and this crazy divorce, but I have been trying to do more mini sessions with people. And this was one that I did this morning and one that I get asked for a lot. So in lieu of me saying it over and over and over again, I can just send somebody this link and say, just listen to it. I'm sorry that it got to be 15 minutes long. I'll be giving a session tonight for the PPR. It should be really good. We've had some really good sessions. I always have a good time, especially when the students participate, when they're like in it. So anyway, until next time, if you would like to sign up for a session, just email me at ssauceda@teacherbuilder.net. So thanks.